Alright then, so now we've set up the React CDN links, we can start using React in this page. The first thing we need to do is to create what's known as a React component. So components are like the lifeblood or the building blocks of any React application. On a typical React website, pretty much every section on the site would be a component. For example, you might have a navbar component, a sidebar component, a content component, and a gallery component. Each of these components are made up of a template and any functionality that component might have. For example, the template of the navbar might look like this, and it might also contain a function to log a user in. Now, we'll talk more about templates and functionality later on, but for now, I just want you to have this idea of pages being built from React components. Now, in our case, for now, we're just going to use React to build a single component in our existing web page. So let's give that a whirl. So then, a React component is basically just a JavaScript function. And inside that function, we can create a component template and also any component functionality. So let's create our first React component. So what I'm going to do is make an arrow function. And that function is going to be stored in a constant called banner. And notice the function name is starting here with a capital. That's required when it comes to React components. It should always start with a capital letter. Other than that, you can pretty much call it what you want, but I'd avoid using names already given to HTML elements like header or nav or div. Okay, so we have this function right now, which will act as our React components. And inside it, we can essentially do two main things. We can create some component functionality in the form of regular JavaScript functions and code, and we can also create a template for the component. We're just going to focus on the template side of things for now. So to create a template for a component, you need to return it from the function. So let's add in a return statement. And then typically, when we're returning a template that's going to take up several lines of code, we'll surround the whole thing, the whole template, in parentheses. And then inside here, we can just create our template. So what we're about to write is known as JSX, which is very, very much like HTML, but it's not exactly the same. Now, we're going to talk more about JSX in the next lesson. For now, let's just create a dead simple template, a div tag, and then inside that div, we'll just do a paragraph tag as well. And then inside that, we'll just say banner. So this is a really simple template, right, thus far. And now we have a React component, which is just a function that returns a JSX template. The next thing we want to do is render this component template to the DOM to inject it into our HTML page. This is where the React DOM package comes into play that we added up in the head. Because we loaded that in, we have access to an object called React DOM, and on that we have a render method. Now, this render method takes in two arguments. The first argument is the component that we want to render. In our case, that's going to be the banner component, but we don't just say banner. Instead, we use this component just like an HTML tag. So we enclose it in angle brackets, and it's self-closing as well. That's the way we use components in React, just like regular HTML tags. The second argument to this render method is a place in the DOM that we want to render this component to. Well, I want it to go inside the div with the ID of banner. So we can just use a regular JavaScript method here to grab that element. We can say document.getElement by ID, and that's going to grab an element by the ID, and we'll pass in the banner ID. So this is a regular JavaScript function to grab a DOM node. So now we're telling React DOM to take our banner component and render it inside this DOM node right here. So it takes the template that we made and it outputs it right here in the page inside this div with an ID of banner. And now we should be able to see that template right here in the browser. We can inspect the element to see the code. And you're going to notice that it's exactly the same as the JSX template that we made. So congratulations, you've made your very first React component. Granted, at the minute it's pretty useless and we may as well just have coded the template directly in the HTML, but later on when you learn more about components and their functionality, you'll see exactly how powerful this can be.